So the original PlayStation, of course, was released here in Europe in 1995. It debuted in Japan a year earlier in 1994. And as with other consoles, manufacturers like to make revisions. They like to make things cheaper to make, maybe improve on the console's design, maybe even to fix issues that come about in particular revisions. So in this video, I thought I'd go through some of the major original PlayStation revisions. I've got a few examples sitting here. Maybe as well give sort of a buyer's guide for anybody that's interested in picking up one of these old consoles, because there are some models that are better than others. There's some things that you might want to know about. There's some things that you might want to avoid about a particular model of console. So we'll try and go through that in this video here, and I hope this is useful. A bit of a trip down memory lane as well, looking at different PlayStation models. So in Japan, the first model would have been the SCPH 1000 series. Now that particular console was very, very similar to our SCPH 1002, which we've got here. In North America, they got the SCPH 1001, which is very similar to ours. The only difference is it's NTSC, it's 60 Hz rather than ours, which is PAL 50 Hz. But the Japanese 1000 series had a bit of a difference. So if we spin round my SCPH 1002 here, and if we look at the ports on the back, obviously you've got your standard AC input, you've got the AV multi-out, you've also got composite with a little power, a little DC 5V output. That's because the RF modulator for the 1002 or the 1000 series essentially plugs into these two composite sockets, or the composite and mono audio, and is actually powered by that little output there to give you RF. In later models, RF could be taken from the AV multi-out port. There was actually a modulator basically within the cable that goes off to the television. And you've also got this serial I/O port, and you've got parallel. So that's the 1002. The 1000, you'll notice we've got this space here where there's nothing. There's a bit of a gap, bit of a void between the AV multi-out and the composite video socket here. The Japanese 1000 series actually had an S-video port, or SVHS port here. They had an S-video port right on the back of the console. Of course, the AV multi-out is also capable of outputting S-video via the right kind of cable. But yeah, the Japanese 1000 series has S-video, which ours does not. By this time, the North American 1001 and the European 1002 series had that removed, which basically makes this console have more in common with a later Japanese revision, which was the 3000 series, than it actually does with the 1000 series. But I think Sony, to avoid confusion with numbering systems, they called this the 1002 and the North American model the 1001. So some other things to look at as well on our 1002, because I know it differs from other consoles. If you notice on top here, we've got power with the word power written on it, and we've got open with the word open written on it. That's significant, as you'll see when we check out the other revisions. Reset, very much the same as it is on all the other revisions. And design-wise, yeah, it looks pretty good. You've got your controller ports and memory card slots on the front of the machine as well. When we open up the CD drive, there's something else to be wary of as well. You can see the CD drive is kind of orientated top left. So that's actually heading towards the power supply, because the main power supply for the PlayStation is actually in here. There's a board that goes down the side here. This actually causes a bit of a problem with these earlier versions, these 1000 revisions, 1002 that we've got here, for example, because the CD drive, all the heat that's being sort of created by that power supply as it's stepping the voltages down to what the motherboard needs, all the heat which is coming off those components is going towards and is sitting right next to the laser mechanism. And the earlier laser mechanisms had problems where they would get hot, and components, the plastic components that make up the laser sled and the laser assembly, would start to warp as a result. So you'd end up with a laser that in certain positions along that sled wouldn't be sat square, which means that it would have issues tracking and focusing on the disc, thus causing the FMV skipping that you'll hear people talking about when they mention the 1002 model. So it really does mean that the 1002 is one of those models that, to be quite honest, you'll probably want to avoid. People also refer to this one as the audiophile model because it has a superior DAC, a digital to analog converter, when compared to later revisions. Now, strictly speaking, this machine in its standard form isn't what I would class as audiophile, and audio enthusiasts, audiophiles, would say the same, because they don't just take one of these and use it straight up with their audio system. They actually make some modifications to the audio output circuitry on these, and reportedly that makes this, when it's modded, very, very close to a sort of a high-end CD player. The sound quality is very close to that of a high-end CD player. So yeah, you could do that if you were really interested in, you know, having that superior sound output. You could go down that road. Personally, I wouldn't, because the whole point of the PlayStation for me is it's a games console. I'm going to play games on it. If I want to listen to CDs, yeah, I've got plenty of means of listening to CDs. And to be honest, nowadays, CDs are becoming less and less relevant as everybody moves to a digital solution like a streaming service. Still, I'm rambling on about other things here. The topic of conversation is the PlayStation. So yeah, the CD-ROM drive, pointing top left. Now I've actually replaced the laser in this console. I've actually taken this laser out of one of the PS1, the little smaller ones, which I'm going to show in a moment, because the laser assembly is very similar in terms of the cable length for the data cable for the laser is of similar length, so you can put it straight in, but you do have to change the top cover. On this, you'll notice the top cover that surrounds the laser is actually black, and if you look at the PS1, it's actually grey, but it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit inside this case, so you have to swap it. But it's easy, it's a couple of little screws, and then you can slide the cover off and then pop on the replacement cover, so it's not a big deal. But yeah, the 1002 machines are a bit of a pain in the arse because of the laser situation. I have got another one of these that's in a box. The box is in decent condition, it's complete, and I've got it in a protective case in my cupboard because that one I don't use. It's for collection purposes only, because I would definitely consider myself a PlayStation enthusiast and a PlayStation collector. Definitely. But yeah, the 1002, it's my personal favourite model. I really like this model, but it's a pain in the arse. And if you are going to pick up a 1002, definitely look at getting a replacement laser mechanism from something like a PS1, one of the later models, because it will fit in there when you change the cover. The connector is long enough. So that's the 1002. If we move this one out of the way, ta-da, we've got another one. Now this one is the SCPH 5552. There's actually another revision in between this and the 1002 that I've just shown you, and that is the 5502 that we also got over here in Europe. Now you'll notice straight off the bat, the buttons are slightly different. This is a power symbol rather than the word power. This is an eject symbol rather than the word open. And if I actually go ahead and open this, and we'll look at this part straight away, notice how the CD-ROM laser unit is now facing that way. So it's facing away from a heat source, which is the power supply, because the power supply is still located here. Some of the components that make up the power supply have been changed somewhat since the 1002. It is a bit more simplified, if you like. But yeah, it would still generate some heat. But the CD-ROM has been relocated away from that area, so you don't get that same issue of the heat warping the plastic on the laser sled, thus causing issues. This particular 5552 has been mod chipped, and this is close to the model that I would have had back in 1997 when I purchased my original PlayStation when I was about 13 years old. It would have been very, very similar in terms of revision to this one. It probably would have been the 5552 thinking about it. But if we look around the back, there are some other changes as well. And this is something I remember reading about in a PlayStation magazine. I'll just focus you in on the back of the console here. And you'll notice the absence of any composite sockets, and of course the RF output, the little DC 5 volts for the RF modulator. You've got the AV multi-out, and you've got serial, because you could use a serial link cable to link PlayStation consoles together to do a bit of local multiplayer with the same game, 2 different televisions, 2 PlayStations and a serial link cable. That was basically what that was used for. You've still got your parallel port, which is under the cover here. Not sure if you've been able to make out the text. It says parallel I/O on the back there. But yeah, no composite sockets. So by this point in time, they'd removed those composite sockets, which, to be honest, back in 1995 and that sort of time frame, they would have been useful to have, because it meant that you could have another audio source, essentially another audio output, going to like a hi-fi or a receiver of some kind, like an audio receiver, which meant you could connect this up to a sound system and have really, really awesome sound. So it's a shame they took that away. But generally speaking, the 5552 in this case, and I'd imagine the same will be said for the 5502, as far as I can see, they're pretty reliable. This one works pretty good. I have changed the laser, I'll be honest, because the one that came with this machine didn't work when I bought this. Interesting story, when I bought this console, Originally, it was advertised on eBay as a 1002, not a 5552, and I was disappointed when I received a 5552 instead because I really wanted the 1002, the first model. But anyway, that is the 5552. Everything else pretty much standard the same. So this is the 9002 PlayStation. This is the last revision of the original design, if you like. There's an additional change that I'll show you shortly. Pretty much everything else externally looks the same. Craig Turner, thank you to him, Yam Yam Retro Gaming. He actually sold me this console. He was selling off some of his sort of spare consoles, and I got in touch with him and he sold me this. Reasonable price. It's in decent condition, really happy with it, so thank you, Craig. And it's helped me make this video, so it's definitely needed, and thank you very much for helping me with that. So this is the 9002, as I said. You'll notice that the buttons, they all look the same as the 5552. Power symbol, open stroke eject symbol, and obviously the reset was the same all along. CD-ROM drive position, the same as it was in the 5552, and of course the 5502 as well. So yeah, you're not going to have those same laser issues that I talked about in the 1002. They won't be a problem. Generally, again, this console is pretty reliable. The motherboard inside is also a smaller motherboard. They've really managed to shrink things down and consolidate components, get smaller components where possible. So the board is smaller. It would have been cheaper to manufacture as well at this point in time. Very late in the PlayStation's life that this one came out. But it's round the back where there is another absentee. You'll notice, yeah, we still don't have composite sockets. Still got our serial port, still got AV multi-out. Obviously, we need that to be able to rig it up to a television. Power's the same, but there's nothing here. There is absolutely nothing where the parallel port once lived. By this point in time, because Sony had not used anything or released anything official that would connect up to that parallel port, they removed it. And again, it's another cost-cutting exercise, as well as removing a way of allowing people to play, you know, imported and pirated games by using a cartridge like a equalizer cartridge or Action Replay or Game Shark or whatever, to be able to play backup games easily or imported games easily. So it was a port they didn't need anymore, so they took it away. So this console, for instance, might not appeal to you if you want to use like an Action Replay or an Xplorer cartridge. I've done a video about Xplorer cartridges, the ones that I've got in my collection. The link is in the description, so go ahead and check that out on my channel. So yeah, it's a shame. It's one reason why you might not want to go for a 9002, because the lack of a parallel port on the back. And then in 2000, Sony released a complete redesign of the original PlayStation, known as the PS1. Here it is, this little white console. It looks really nice. I have to say, I was impressed when I first saw this back in 2000. I absolutely loved the look of the thing. I thought this looks awesome. So if I can just try and get you focused and close up, that's good. You can see it's called PS1 now rather than PlayStation. You've still got the open/eject symbol here. You've got the power symbol here, and you've got the word reset because there's no reset button. Basically, to reset the console, turn it off and turn it back on again. Simple as that. And inside, the CD-ROM drive, interestingly, is facing that way, but this runs off of an external transformer, an external power supply. So you're not going to get them heat issues that I discussed on the 1002 on this one because of how it's been made. The board is nice and small. The memory card ports and the controller ports are actually part of the motherboard. They're not a separate unit in this machine. And yeah, these are generally quite reliable from what I've seen, with the exception of one thing, which I'll talk about in a moment. And of course, on the back, we've got another absentee. So we've got our AV multi-out. Again, you need that, obviously, because to connect it to a television. And you've got this, this power connector here, because as I said, it's got an external power supply, an external transformer, but no serial port. You've also got these mounts because you can get an LCD screen, which I've got with my other one of these in a box somewhere, which attaches to the back and gives you a little LCD screen that sort of sits up at the back of the machine, which is really awesome. Now, what was I saying about unreliability? Yeah, a few of the consoles I've seen and I've had and have sort of passed through my hands, there's been issues with the power jack connector and how it's soldered onto the board. Essentially, it's a bit like the Sega Mega Drive 2, where because there's stress of the connector being pushed in and pulled out and moved around, the solder joints that secure that connector in place, they crack. They start to fracture, they start to crack. The connection is not there, it's not solid, and you'll find that the machine won't respond if that's the case. So one of the things I've had to do with this one in particular was I had to reflow the solder joints on that power connector, and now it works perfectly every time. And this one is also mod chip, just like my 5552 is, so I can play backup games on this one. Not imported games, because it's not, the mod chip doesn't patch another piece of the boot up that was changed on this console, because with the other PlayStation consoles, all it cared about was the region code that was on the wobble region of the CD, which you can't replicate using a normal CD-ROM drive and a CD burner. But there's also a string of text that's in one of the boot files, essentially, on the disc, which will say Sony Computer Entertainment Europe or Sony Computer Entertainment America, for instance. This console, with this particular console, the BIOS essentially looks for that string of text to match the region of the console. So if I put a disc in, a backup disc or an imported disc from America, it will not play it because it's expecting to see Sony Computer Entertainment Europe written in that string of text. It doesn't see it, it sees something different, it won't boot the game. So that's another slight disadvantage, I would say, with this one. I think there is a mod chip that will patch that as well, but I'm not entirely sure. I'll have to read up on that. But yeah, I like the little PS1. It's got that issue with the power jack, which is a little bit of a problem with these, but in general, I like these. And yeah, this is definitely a console that I would consider if you're not bothered about the lack of a serial port and the lack of a parallel port. But my recommendation, 100%, would be to go for something like a 5502 or a 5552, which has actually got the parallel port on the back in case you want to use like an action replay, equalizer, or Xplorer cheat cartridge with it. If you're not bothered about the lack of composite sockets, if you want the composite sockets for whatever reason, and you want the original or OG model of PlayStation, then go ahead and get yourself a 1002. But personally, I would go for the 5502 or the 5552 if I was buying a console now. So guys, thanks for watching. Catch you again soon.